Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to the 8th episode of Season 12 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Last week, we covered the title track from this season's album, Echo, and I was late getting the poll up, so I don't have those results for you yet, but the votes are coming in thick and fast, and it's looking hugely positive at the moment, as one might expect. I did have some lovely, very thoughtful comments this week on social media that ran a little bit longer, but given people took the time to share these thoughts, the least I can do is read them out in full. It's kind of funny because I wasn't actually sure where this one landed with people and whether anyone would agree with me that this is a 10 out of 10 song. When you hear people talking about Echo, it's usually Room at the Top, Swing In, or songs like Rhino Skin or Free Girl Now. I don't often see a lot of people posting about the title track in the Facebook group, so it's really cool to discover that this one hits hard for other folks too. Over on Instagram, @CouplesRob responded, "I never realised how much I appreciated this song until listening to the podcast. This was probably the rawest Tom ever sounded. His voice even sounded like he just woke up. The last verse is chilling, and you know it's authentic. I can't think of another song Tom was this derogatory in." And I do agree with you, Rob. His voice definitely feels very intentionally, it's been less stark and dry, so that the emotion of the lyrics carries that extra bit of weight, doesn't it? On Blue Sky, my pal Steve Ursel wrote, "You did a great job breaking down the lyrics on this one, and particularly the changes of perspectives across the verses." Well, thanks, Steve. I love this song. Probably pips Room at the Top for best track on the album. It is sad, dark, and emotionally captivating. Yeah, thanks, Steve. I've always thought that Echo was the cornerstone of this album, just as a song, and I suspect that Tom did too, given, the album took its name. But I do flip back and forth between Echo and Room at the Top, for which I think the quote-unquote best song on the album is. At the moment, it's Echo for me, but that could also be recency bias, and I think really they're both equally strong and just as good as one another, to be honest. On Facebook, Richard Gibson left this comment. "Once again, Kevin, your detail and analysis is uncanny. One of the best things about the podcast is that it gives you a toolkit to listen again more deeply to Tom's catalogue, both on a lyrical and a musical level. I bought the CD on release, and I was wondering where Howie was on the cover. Later, I got a DVD of Fillmore, and he looked really different, and I sensed something was going very sadly wrong. In the midst of all this, we'd heard tales of Tom's divorce, just snippets in a pre-internet age. Echo, the song, seemed to have all of that. It is an incredible piece of music, mournful and powerful, taken at its own unhurried pace. Tom's vocal, as you say, seems to switch characters, or the character seems to flit from various states of mind and tone. Sad, conversational, blaming, loving, desperate, and hopeful. I never forget hearing the lines, 'Well, I woke up right here in a pool of sweat and with a box of pills and you.' That absolutely jumped out and seemed so desperate. The lines that follow show both love and blame. It is complex, but if you want a song to play when you're going through a rough patch and want to wallow, vent, blame, be sad, desperate, but also have a chink of light and hope, then Echo was written for all of us. Who else was putting all this into 6 minutes?" Well, first of all, that's extremely kind of you to say, Richard. Honestly, embarking on this podcast has really enriched my understanding and appreciation of not just Tom's music, but the craft of songwriting in general. And a lot of this is because of the brilliant feedback and other ideas and opinions I get from awesome people like you. And like you, I definitely marvel at the way you can condense an entire psychology into just over 6 minutes of an album track. Tom was a genius, and that word gets bandied around a lot, but as a songwriter, it's a title I think he can wear with the best of them. Mike B wrote, "A fantastic episode. I was extra pumped for this one. 10 out of 10. Perhaps Tom's most overlooked and least played and least recognized 10 out of 10, in my opinion. I feel like the album Echo gets more recognition, in brackets, which is very little, than the track Echo, which I have to say is the best on the album. I hope Echo as an album receives its just due, similar to how Long After Dark finally has decades after. They were my two most underrated Petty albums. Hard Promises, The Last DJ, and Highway Companion also in that mix. I've definitely listened to Echo more than any track on the album, maybe my top 20 or even top 10 listened to Petty track. If I were to label the song, and album for that matter, in 2 words, hauntingly beautiful." Now, that's a really good question that I could probably do a whole episode on, and maybe will sometime. What is Tom Petty's most overlooked and least played, least recognized 10 out of 10? Maybe something like a panel discussion could be a fun format for it, I think. And Echo it would certainly be a leading contender for that title. And, now that I've written this down and said it out loud, I think this conversation definitely needs to happen. So look out for that in maybe a future season. To finish up social media, my pal and executive producer, Paul Roberts, commented, one of your best episodes, great analysis. Well done, Kev. Thanks always, Paul. This is a giant of a song. And when I'm in a certain melancholic mood, his undisputed best. I played this a lot after his passing, likening the chorus to the fact that as Tom had gone, his character, his personality, and body of work would become a sad echo and diminish over time. Little did I know about all the subsequent releases from the vaults. And well done for locating a solo live version. It may be lo-fi, but coming in at nearly 8 minutes, it is a treat to these ears. Well, again, I massively appreciate that, Paul. I always try to do my best with every song, and like the songs themselves, I think I do better some weeks than others. I think if I had to sum up the song as a whole, though, I couldn't really do better than the way you put it. Echo is a giant of a song. Right, thanks as always for those wonderful comments. The connection with the wider Pettyverse remains the most rewarding of publishing this show, and I've a few guest episodes coming up that are on the burner that I'm looking forward to recording in the next few weeks to broaden that conversation out. So for now, though, let's get into a song that marks a gear shift from the solemnity of Echo. It's the midpoint track on the album, Won't Last Long. Okay, let's get into it. I said in the closing to last week's episode that I get a strong connection between this song and the Jeff Lynne era of Tom's work. So close your eyes, listen to the first 4 bars, and imagine coming out of Too Good to Be True and into this song. It feels as natural a transition as anything in the catalogue to me, and I think it's partially the blend of those 2 acoustic guitars panned left and right, sitting underneath that crunchy electric part from Mike. The tempo, the bounce, and the feel of this just screams into the Great Wide Open era to me. I do find it really interesting that there have been a few instances this season where I've commented that I think that songs or parts of songs sound like they'd be at home on different Petty albums or in different Petty eras. It's the only album in the catalogue really for me that calls back strongly or forward so presciently to other eras or other records. It's almost as if the turmoil in Tom's life and in his head was throwing him around thematically, and he was grasping at any lifeline he could to keep his head above water. And so some of those previous musical anchor points could have been that respite and that calm from the storm. Won't Last Long begins with those 2 fantastic acoustic guitars playing a very simple riff. It's a nice little 2-chord piece alternating between it's like a D, D7 phrase and up to the G. So one of those that you're not 100% sure which key it's in right off the bat. I wanted to see more closely what Tom was playing on this one, so I headed over to the brilliant Judge Timber's YouTube channel, as I like to cheat from time to time and see how he's interpreting the parts, because he usually gets them either spot on or pretty damn close. And in this case, I do think he's writing what he's playing. He also points out that there are multiple guitar parts, and he has his guitar capoed on the 5th fret. So that part definitely sounds like the part in the right channel to me. But what's cool is that little down, up, up is, I think, being accentuated by a 9th or some sort of suspended or diminished note on the guitar in the right channel. Like instead of, where they're playing that 7th, that little hammer-on 7th thing in the left channel, on the one guitar part, it's a different note than the other channel, but it's not every bar. If you listen to the 3rd bar of those opening 4, there's definitely something funky and different being added over on that left side. So I suspect that these 2 acoustics are being played by Tom and Scott Thurston, with, I suspect, again, Tom on the right and Scott on the left before Mike C comes in with the drums and bass, and he's sitting in the middle. And let's talk about this drum fill to kick us into the full band arrangement. This is something you just don't hear Stan Lynch do. Steve comes in between the beats on the and of the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and count. So you get this almost confusing, where'd the 1 go kind of feeling that all music nerds like me just love. As always, that snare is whip crack sharp, and we settle back on the 1 into that fantastic propulsive backbeat that underscores so much of the Heartbreakers' rhythmic center. And Mike's electric part just sits on the established strumming pattern and gives the song a slightly grittier edge once we're through that intro. As Tom's vocal comes in to signal the start of the verse, Mike's guitar just hits that D chord and lets it ring for 3 bars before playing that G pattern more fully when it hits that 4th bar of the progression. The bass line is surprisingly active in this one. It moves around quite a bit more than Howie Epstein's parts ordinarily do, and I wonder if this one might actually be Mike Campbell, who is credited with playing bass on the album alongside Howie, but without actual song breakdowns being available. And I don't know why I get the feeling this might be Mike, but it's a feeling I haven't been able to shake. And if anyone has any definitive information about this, I would love to know. Dallas Elliker, you usually have the scoop. You can usually dig out the little worms that I can't find. So if you know anything about whether Mike actually played on this one, let me know, dude. When we get to the pre-chorus, we switch to C major. And it's at this point that my brain said, this song is actually in G, not D. We're starting on the major fifth with that incidental seventh rather than starting on the root. So again, my little nerd brain got happy about that when I realized that's what Tom was doing. Because it's another one of those songs where he's not really nailing his close to the mass when it comes to the key the song is in. And this gets confused even more when we hit the chorus because we get a minor key added with a seventh and something else thrown into the mix. There's also a harmony vocal added into the mix here to really sort of, it throws it off a little bit, so you're never really sitting exactly on the root in the chorus, which is unusual in most songs. It's a pretty breakneck pace for this one in terms of getting through the sections, which gives the song an urgency and a sense of drive. This is also accentuated by the fact that the lyrics in the song are way more repetitive than anything we've heard from Tom thus far. And I'll talk later about whether I love that, but in terms of the lyrics and music marrying together successfully, I think they do. The chorus actually does resolve back to that root G chord before the turnaround takes us back to that major fifth, the D, which signals the start of the second verse. We now hear Ben Montenchi's piano filling in some of the gaps slightly, in addition to another overdubbed lead guitar part. In the pre-chorus this time, Tom sings, "Yeah, it's not my day," leading into "I'm down, but it won't last long," and the chorus proceeds as before. Then the song takes a hard left and goes off-road. We have this organ-led bridge that is just fantastic. It feels like this little psychedelic trip that we get taken on, almost like the narrator is taking us up and above his trials and tribulations and just letting us float a while. That marvelous C major that's added into this C section, it technically becomes a flat seventh, which isn't something the Heartbreakers really ever did. If you listen to this section, because, we're getting G, A, and D, so that, we're playing around with what key this thing's in, and that C becomes, like I said, that flat seventh. If you listen to this section and think about The Doors, or even Zeppelin in the song Thank You, it has that sort of old-school rock band dynamic to it that I adore, and it's unexpected and a delightful direction for the song to take. And when Tom joins vocally after 8 bars singing "Half My Brain Is Gone Away," you really do get the sense of someone detaching themselves, possibly pharmaceutically, from their current reality in order to escape it. It's such a stoner rock / psychedelic line, which again, you don't tend to hear very often from Tom. But I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end and whether I think it elevates or detracts from the song. But the organ tone that Ben Mont uses here is absolutely sublime. Talk about understanding precisely what the half of Tom's brain that was there needed at that specific moment. It's a beautiful, whimsical line that he plays and which is added to by a very simple tremolo-affected guitar. It portrays that disconnection in a way that actually wouldn't need lyrics. You'd understand what was happening even if Tom didn't come in and tell you explicitly. I love it when music can paint the picture without words, but the other thing that happens here is that the effect on Tom's voice is changed. It's a lot softer and it's brought forward in the mix, but it has a very slightly different EQ. It feels like maybe there's slightly more bottom end in the vocal mix here, just to really differentiate this scene from the rest of the movie. That is all thrown out then as Tom sings "So Far Away" to bring us back to that driving backbeat and the second half of the song. Okay, folks, it's time for some petty trivia. Your question from last week was this: where was bass player Howie Epstein born? Is it A, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, B, Los Angeles, California, C, Tampa, Florida, or D, Santa Fe, New Mexico? Well, Howie Epstein was born in Milwaukee on July 21st, 1955, to a father who was a top local record producer who had worked with various rock and roll and soul groups in the 1950s and 60s. Sam Epstein passed away at the age of just 37 when Howie was only 15 years old. His mother Judy reportedly struggled to cope with the loss of her husband, and according to a profile in Milwaukee Magazine, she largely withdrew from her responsibilities as a single parent, leading to a more unstructured household environment for Howie and his brothers during their teenage years. Judy passed away in 2002, just a year before Howie's death in 2003, so Howie didn't have the greatest foundations in life to work from during his formative teenage years, losing a father so suddenly to a heart attack the guy who had driven him around to gigs in his hometown and introduced him to lots of music. How he went on to play with other musical luminaries such as John Hyatt and, of course, Del Shannon, before finding his way into the Heartbreakers. In 2002, how he was fired from the band due to his substance addiction and how much of a toll it had taken on his ability to participate in the rigors of being in a huge rock and roll act. After Howie's passing, Tom wrote the following in a Rolling Stone article, which summed up the ache he felt for his bandmate's passing. It's like you got a tree dying in the backyard, and you're kind of used to the idea that it's dying, but you look out there one day and they cut it down, and you just can't imagine that beautiful tree isn't there anymore. Howie was survived by his brothers Craig and Bradley, and by his daughter Jamie Leffler. He was interred at the Second Home Cemetery in Greenfield, Wisconsin. Your question for this week is this. What is the name of the Del Shannon album that Tom produced, during which he met and poached Howie for the Heartbreakers? Is it A, Total Commitment, B, Rock On, C, Drop Down and Get Me, or D, Runaway with Del Shannon? Okay, back to the song. You may be expecting a solo here, but we don't get one. Tom brings us back to the next verse, pre-chorus, chorus, and after this we have a strange instrumental space, with Benmont's lower register piano notes guiding the melodic movement of the song, but it's a rare instance where, to me, it feels like something's missing. It feels like there should be something happening that isn't. Maybe a solo, maybe something, Mike doing something in there. Tom comes back in to sing the chorus part again, and Mike does noodle a little underneath, in a tone that he's used before on this album, but it's mixed way back, almost as if to suggest that it's a voice in the back of the narrator's head that is confused and again disconnected. Okay, so here's where I have to do something that I very, very rarely do on this show. I actually think this is a 3.5-minute song, needlessly padded out to 4.5 minutes. And don't get me wrong, I still enjoy listening to it, but from 3 minutes to 4 minutes, nothing really happens. There isn't any significant build or any new elements that are added, and there's a very long fade before, the song ends with some very strange organ and what almost sounds like tape noise. Now, we had this type of odd dissonant type section in other songs. I'm thinking, Even the Losers or Louisiana Rain, but where I think it adds character and a quirky element of fun to those tracks, here it just feels a bit tacked on and unnecessary. And if indeed this is a story of someone coming apart at the seams and struggling to keep their sanity intact, which I suspect it is at its root, then you could argue that this last 20 seconds is the final descent into madness, but hear me out. I think that this song could end on that D7th chord that we start with, ringing out, with that organ part in the bridge possibly adding back in that slightly far away quality to proceedings, and have everything wrapped up by about 3 minutes and 20 seconds. So end as you start with that, don't end on the root, don't start on the root. I think that might work. And I suspect that my feeling this way is connected to the association I make back to Into the Great Wide Open, and the tendency from Tom and Jeff Lynne to strip songs back to only their most necessary ingredients. I don't think this song would have got anywhere near 4:30 if Jeff Lynne had produced it, for example. So for me, it feels like this one was left to be too long, with no one saying, hey, do you think this entire thing is needed at the tail end? And again, I'll say that it doesn't really change my opinion of the song as a whole, and I still enjoy it, but it's one of those rare examples of a Petty song that I think could be improved by just a slightly different or a stronger production decision. Also, I mentioned the repetition of the lyrics, and I do have to say that while I basically like what the song is saying, I'm down, but it won't last long. Again, it's that theme, like swinging, these themes of redemption, these themes that, okay, things are not going well, but I'll fight through it and I'll get through it. That sentiment's a great sentiment, but it feels underwritten from Tom Petty. This is the guy who just last week gave us Echo, and earlier this season gave us Lonesome Sundown, Swinging, Room at the Top, Free Girl Now. This is a master of the written word. The reliance of repetition in this song, while I think it sort of lines up with the idea that the character at the center of the song is falling apart, and is probably neurotic and completely screwed up, I think Tom could have built out from that theme and written more with less reliance on that repetition. It's still a good song, but I do think this is one of those very, very, very rare instances of Tom being okay with the song being, quote-unquote, good enough. Now, I realize that some middle-aged guy sitting in his basement in Saskatoon, Canada, shouldn't have the temerity to question an artist as brilliant as Tom, but I hope I've built enough goodwill with you, dear listeners, to suggest that even Tom had one or two slight hiccups along the gold-paved way. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the running length of this one and the lyrical content, so please do let me know in the comments on social media. Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. The bridge in this song definitely saves the rating a little for me. I like the song, and I think it's a solid album track on a great album, but there's that nagging thing at the back of my brain that says this song should have been another 2 points higher with a little bit more care and attention. As I've said before, we know that Tom wasn't in the best place mentally during the making of this album, so of course we have to make allowances, but despite the fact I do like the song and I adore the bridge, the simplicity of the rest of it, the lack of a defined solo section, and the extended outro along with those repetitious lyrics means I'm going to give this an increasingly rare 6 out of 10. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Deep Dive Podcast Network. Go check us out at deepdivepodcastnetwork.com. You can also check out my other shows, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I do with my best friend Randy, who does all the music in this show. And you can also check out the Ultimate Catalogue Clash that I co-host with my very good friend Corey Morissette. We're just wrapping up. We got one, we just dropped an episode today as I'm recording this, and we have one more episode to go in season 5. Then we're moving on to REM in season 6. 4 albums: Green, Out of Time, Automatic for the People, Monster. Those are the albums that we're going to be talking about in season 6. Also, we just recorded this past weekend the very last episode of a new podcast that my friend Corey Morissette is putting out called Rock Court. And the first case to be tried before judge and jury is who is the better lyricist, David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar? And I was fortunate enough to be invited on to be the rock tourney responsible for presenting the case for why Sammy Hagar is the better lyricist. That's going to be coming out over the next few weeks, and you'll be able to listen to me argue passionately about a completely different band. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, subscribe as applicable, and again, please leave a review or a rating if you haven't done that already. Keep talking to me on social media, and I will keep reading out your comments on the show. And as a weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way. So, when you're looking for Tom's music, please visit official streaming platforms or go to your local independent record seller and grab some actual physical media to support local business. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merch for this show, go to tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook. And make sure you check out Tom Petty Radio on Channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy. And I'll be back with you next week to talk about the rootin' tootin' Billy the Kid. Bye-bye.